Good day everyone, I am Onico from HRDM 1B and this is my midterm project in Fundamentals of Accounting. Today I'm going to discuss these 5 topics right here: the basic accounting equation, the T account, double entry system, normal balances of accounts, and how to record transaction using T accounts. So first, what is the basic accounting equation? The basic tool of accounting is the accounting equation. This equation presents on the left side the resources controlled by the enterprise, and to the right side the present obligations of the enterprise and the residual interest in the assets or the resources supplied by the owners to the business. It states that assets must always equal liabilities and owner's equity. So in other words, it is the fundamental accounting equation. It is also called as the balance sheet equation. Represents the relationship between the assets, liabilities, and owner's equity of a person or business. So this is the basic accounting model. Asset equals liabilities plus owner's equity. So ano-ano nga ba itong tatlong to? So ang assets, ito ay ang resources na pag-aari ng owner. Ang example nito ay ang mga cash, accounts receivable, property, plants and equipments, inventories, and intangibles. Next is liabilities. It is the financial obligations or utang ng isang business. Ito ay ang mga tinatawag na loans payable, accounts payable, and notes payable. Last is ang owner's equity. Ito yung claims ng owner sa assets ng business. Ito ay ang capital and net income. Take note that the total assets and the total liabilities and owner's equity should always balance. It means that in every transaction, dapat equal sila. So to understand more, let's have a basic example. So the total asset of your business is 90,000, your liabilities is 40,000, and your equity is 50,000. Again, your total asset is 90,000. And now, ipagpa-plus lang natin itong liabilities and owner's equity, which is 40,000 plus 50,000 is equal to 90,000. So, equal to sa total asset mo. That means balance sila. So, ganun lang ang concept behind accounting equation. Dapat palaging balance. Now, ituturo ko sa inyo ang dalawa pang equation aside to this equation. Ito ay ang liabilities equals assets minus owner's equity, and owner's equity equals assets minus liabilities. So, paano nangyari yon? Gagamitan lang natin to ng transposition of formula like algebra. So, itong owner's equity ay ililipat natin sa other side. So, from positive owner's equity ay magiging negative. And ang matitira dito sa side na to, sa right side, ay ang liability. And dito sa left side ay ang assets minus owner's equity. So, gagawin lang natin yan ng original na equation natin. So, magiging ganito. Liabilities equals asset minus owner's equity. Ganun din kapag ang hinahanap ay owner's equity, assets minus liability. So, another example, gamit yung 3 equation, ay ito, kapag owner's equity ang hinahanap, again, ipagmaminus lang natin itong assets minus liabilities, which is 760,000 minus 360,000 is equal to 400,000 pesos. And kapag liabilities naman ang hinahanap, ipagmaminus lang natin itong assets and owner's equity. So, 860,000 minus 592,000 is equal to 268,000. Kapag assets naman ang hinahanap, ipagpa-plus natin itong liabilities and owner's equity. So, 108,000 plus 860,000 pesos is equal to 868,000. So, ganyan lang kadali ang basic accounting equation. I hope na-explain ko ng maayos. Now, let's move on to the next topic, which is the T account. The basic summary device of accounting is the account. A separate account is maintained for each element that appears in the balance sheet, assets, liabilities, and equity, and in the income as statement. Income and expense. Thus, an account may be defined as a detailed record of the increases, decrease, and balance of each element that appears in an entity's financial statements. So, a T account, it is the graphical representation of a general ledger that records the business transactions. So, ito ay ang paggamit ng malaking letrang T in order to make double entry system bookkeeping easier to manage. So, ito ang T accounts. Meron itong 3 parts, which is ang account title ay dapat nasa itaas, while nasa ibaba ang debit on the left side and credit on the right side. So, upang magamit natin ang T accounts, kailangan natin ng double entry system. So, ano nga ba itong double entry system? The logic of debiting and crediting is related to the accounting equation. Transaction may require additional to both sides, left or sides, deduction from both sides, left and right side, or an addition and subtraction on the same side, left or right sides, but in all cases, the equality must be maintained. Accounting is based on a double entry system, which means that the dual effects of business are recorded. A debit side entry must have a corresponding credit side entry. For every transaction, there must be one or more accounts debited and one or more accounts credited, and must be equal both sides. So, each transaction affects at least 2 accounts. So, ito raw ay isang paraan ng pagre-record ng mga transaction ng business. Ang entry ay recorded in at least 2 accounts, which is a debit and credit. Ang mga amounts recorded sa debit ay dapat equal din sa amount recorded sa credit. So, debit and credit has a rules on accounts. Meron itong mga normal balance of accounts. So, this is the normal balance of accounts or the rules of debit and credit in accounts. So, ang mga accounts ay ang assets, liabilities, capital or equity, revenue or income, and expenses. So, kapag assets, ang normal balance niya ay increase in debit. Kapag liabilities, increase in credit. Capital or equity is increase in in credit, and revenue or income, increase in credit as well, and expenses, it is increase in debit. Now we're going to the last part where all the topics that I discussed is i-apply natin sa pagre-record ng business transaction using T accounts. So this is the business transactions that I prepared. Regina Aguilar started Aguilar Industrial Spray Service on April 1, 2020. During April, Aguilar completed the following transactions. So, ito yung transactions. And this is the following accounts na dapat nating gamitin sa pagre-record ng transactions. So, the first transaction is invested cash in the business, 60,000 pesos. So, pag sinabing invested cash is nag-a-add ng cash sa business. So, this transaction increased both the asset cash and owner's equity. So, according to the rules of debit and credit, an increase in asset is recorded as debit, while increase in owner's equity or equity is recorded as credit. So, ang entry natin dito ay debit cash and credit Aguilar Capital. So, next transaction is bought a service vehicle from CDO Motors for 112,500 pesos, paying 22,500 pesos in cash, with the remainder due in 30 days. So, bumili siya ng service vehicle sa halagang 12,500 pesos. Binayaran ng cash ang 22,500 pesos. So, ang natira na utang niya is 112,500 pesos minus 22,500 pesos is equal to 90,000. So, yun yung utang niya na kailangan niyang bayaran in 30 days. So, ang entry natin is a debit to service vehicle, decrease in assets recorded by a credit to cash, and since may utang siya, so, increase in liabilities recorded by a credit to accounts payable. Kasi ang normal balance ng liabilities is increase in credit side. Third transaction is bought spray equipment on account from Misamis Farm Supplies, 18,000 pesos. So, bumili siya ng spray equipment on account. It means utang. So increase in assets recorded by a debit to spray equipment, and increase in liabilities recorded by a credit to accounts payable. For transaction, paid rent for the month, 5,600 pesos. So nagbayad siya ng rent for the month. Ang entry natin is increase in assets is recorded by a debit to rent expense, and decrease in assets recorded by a credit to cash. Fifth transaction is letter E, paid cash for insurance on service vehicle for the year, 5,760 pesos. So nagbayad siya ng insurance sa service vehicle para sa buong taon. So increase in assets recorded by a debit to prepaid insurance, and decrease in assets recorded by a credit to cash. So next transaction, letter F, received cash for spray services done on a building, 21,750 pesos. So nakatanggap siya dito ng pera dahil nag-spray service siya sa isang building. So ang entry is increase in assets recorded by a debit to cash kasi nakatanggap siyang pera, and increase in owner's equity recorded by a credit to spray services revenue. Because normal balance of equity is increased in credit side. So next transaction is letter G, bought supplies for cash, 5,730. So pumili siya ng supplies gamit ang cash. So increase in assets recorded by a debit to supplies, and decrease in assets recorded by a credit to cash kasi pinambayad niya ay cash. Next transaction is letter H. Billed customers on account for services performed, 4,440. So, naningil siya ng customers on account kasi nag-perform sila ng service. So, ang entry is increase in assets recorded by a debit to accounts receivable, and increase in owner's equity recorded by a credit spray service revenue. So next transaction, letter I, paid cash for utilities, 960 pesos. So nagbayad siya ng utilities gamit ang cash. So increase in owner's equity recorded by a debit to utilities expense, and decrease in assets recorded by a credit to cash kasi nagbayad siya ng cash. Next transaction is letter J. Received bill for gasoline used by the service vehicle during the month, 3,270 pesos. So nakatanggap siya ng bill sa gasoline expense na nagamit niya sa service vehicle niya ng buwan. So it is decreased in owner's equity recorded by a debit to gasoline expense, and increase in liabilities recorded by a credit to accounts payable. So next transaction is letter K. Aguilar withdrew the cash for personal use, 10,500 pesos. Nag-withdraw siya ng 10,500 pesos cash para sa kanyang personal na pangangailangan. So it is decrease in owner's equity recorded by a debit to Aguilar withdrawal, and decrease in assets recorded by a credit to cash. So the last transaction is letter I, paid salaries to employees, 20,400 pesos. So ang entry is decrease in owner's equity recorded by a debit to salaries expense, and decrease in assets recorded by a credit to cash. So ito yung mga accounts na nagamit natin sa pagre-record ng transaction using T accounts. So we're done to the lessons. Thank you for listening. I hope I explained everything well and I understood the lessons in the fundamentals of accounting. Bye!